I'm going to go on this journey. I'm going to do a fast. And then all of a sudden, you go to bed the night before thinking that you will be able to wake up in the morning and you will be able to get yourself fasting. And then once you wake up in the morning, it gets to around 10 in the morning, and you're feeling like, something is happening to me. You start to feel like some hunger pangs. You start to feel like, oh, you're yawning and you're thinking, am I really going to be able to make it through this fasting day? All of a sudden, somebody cooks something. You feel like you smell the smell of food and you're like, what was that? And before you realize, you are like, oh my God, I'm going to break this first. I'm going to get some food because I'm really starving. And then you wake up the second day, it goes like in that cycle over and over again, and gets to a point you are thinking to yourself, will I ever be able to fast? Is it that fasting is only for few? Or is it that fasting is just so difficult? I am not one of those people that can be able to do it. And so today I'm going to be talking about managing of cravings and hunger during the fasting period. Apologies, I had a few issues with with the beginning of the stream, and so I had to start a new one, and hopefully people have been able to find us despite of what has happened. And so today I'm going to be talking about 10 ways or 10 strategies in which you can be able to manage cravings during the fasting period. But before we do that, let's begin by talking a little bit about food cravings. So what are food cravings? You might know already what cravings are, because obviously if you've ever craved for something, some of the cravings can be very specific. You can have like cravings for things like chocolate. You can have cravings for different things. But when it comes to food cravings, they're actually just defined as an intense desire for a specific food. I want to clarify and say that cravings are not necessarily a desire for a specific food, because they are specific cravings, but they are also what are called non-specific cravings, where you can crave anything at any time. And there are so many things that can happen, and so many reasons why you can end up with food cravings. Of course, cravings can come out of nowhere or can be related to seeing, smelling, or hearing something about a specific food. For example, for myself, I can wake up and say I'm not going to have any coffee throughout the day, but the moment somebody starts to talk about coffee, or I smell the smell of coffee, the scent of coffee just sends me into wanting to have a cup of coffee myself. Of course, cravings also involve the appetite centers of the brain, even though they tend to be separated from things like hunger, and it gets to a point that you need to also know the difference between a craving and the difference between a hunger pang. And so when you decide you want to fast, it gets to a point you find that you're like, okay, what is not happening? As I said, cravings can either be selective or they can be non-selective. Selective cravings is where you are having a craving for a specific food. E.g., you can have a craving for a favorite chocolate bar. You can have a craving for a bag of potato crisps for a given flavor. You can have a craving for a given type of a coffee. Or there can be those non-selective where you desire anything really, which could be as a result. Sometimes you might be shocked to hear these as a result of just being thirsty. So being able to identify that craving and being able to identify where is it coming from can be very effective and helpful for you to be able to deal with that. And of course, we know hunger is just when you're feeling hungry, but you need to be able to differentiate between I am craving for something versus I am hungry for something. There are so many different factors that can actually affect our persons or an individual's food cravings. They can be things like hormonal fluctuations. For us ladies, during that time of the month where your hormones are all over the place, you might want to begin to crave for things like chocolate, etc. Or there can be things like pregnancy. And of course, I don't want to talk about pregnancy because our pregnant women we've already identified that they shouldn't be fasting. So again, things like pregnancy can impact and have a big deal in terms of cravings. There can be things like emotions. Emotions play a very important role or a significant role when it comes to cravings. There are things like emotional eating, and you can decide you want to fast, and maybe something happens. You hear some sad news or you hear some wonderful news, amazing news, and that can actually tip you off the scale and make you to decide I'm going to actually start to look for some food and things like that. So being again able to realize that at the end of the day, where are these cravings coming from can be really helpful and can be really effective in terms of you being able to deal with them. There are also people can crave for salty foods, but people can also crave for sweet foods, and some people can crave for both of them. So let's begin and looking at some of the salt cravings. I'm just going to quickly go through this because my friend Dr. Nyambayo and myself will be coming back one of these days when we go back to the Fridays live streams together, and we will be covering something to do with cravings. But just to quickly skim through, there are 7 causes of salt cravings. One can be stressed. When your body is stressed, you might want to crave things like all those foods that are high intensity, high salt, high sugar, high fat, high salt foods, which are mainly most of the time ultra processed foods. And that can become very much of a craving in itself when you kind of are stressed up. So you find that some people end up reaching for comfort zone foods when they are very much stressed up, because that can be another way in which you can be able to kind of feel the comfort when you're stressed out. Lack of sleep, surprisingly enough, as well, can result in craving for foods that are high in satisfaction, and this can actually make you want to crave things like salty foods or crave things that are processed foods, and processed foods are very good when it comes to having high salt intake or salt content in them. Things like boredom as well, stress or emotional eating can actually make people to start craving some particular foods. Excessive sweating, if you're somebody who goes into too much activity, or maybe doing an intense somebody who does intense activity or intense exercise, that can also result in excessive sweating, and excessive sweating can make some individuals to begin to kind of in a way crave some salty foods. The result is also called premenstrual syndrome, or PMS, where there's those variety of changes in the physical and emotional and psychological part of a woman in particular, those days leading up to a period, and that can actually make somebody to crave a little bit more than any other times in terms of the salty foods. There is also what is called Addison disease, or adrenaline disease, or adrenaline insufficiency disease, where the adrenaline glands fail to make they fail to make kind of in a way sufficient amount of what the hormones that are needed, that's adrenaline that is needed for you to be able to cope up with stress and the stress mechanism and things like that, and that can actually make you to want to crave so much in terms of the salt. These hormones, of course, they control the body's response to things like stress and regulate blood pressure, and of course when you have Addison disease, it can cause very low blood pressure and a sudden salt craving. But of course, if again you have any disease conditions, it's not expected for you to be fasting, and so this is not something that you should be thinking or worrying a lot about. There is also the Bartter syndrome, which is a genetic disease that makes people to kind of make it difficult for people to be able to process sodium in the kidneys, and as a result of that, people end up losing too much sodium through urine. And when this happens, this can actually result in things like loss of potassium, or also loss of calcium through the body. Good evening, Steve-O. And this can actually impact at the end of the day, or can actually result in issues to do with craving for salty foods. There is also what is known as the cystic fibrosis, which is a hereditary condition as well, where the body ends up using too much salt than what is needed, and this can lead to sometimes you thinking like I have lack of salt, and of course water outside the cells is also reduced, and this can, because of those salt imbalances, can actually result in the body being disturbed, and if the body is disturbed, can end up with a kind of craving for salt. And some of these conditions that we've talked about, salt cravings, they're actually related in a way or the other to medical conditions. So if you have a medical condition, again, we've mentioned on this channel before, it's not recommended for you to do intermittent fasting, but it might be one of the things you can have a conversation with a medical professional who can be able to guide you and help you to make the right decision coming to what plan fits well for you. And of course, any other information that we share on this channel is not used for diagnosis, is not used for kind of in a way encouraging you to change one thing or the other in your lifestyle, but in a way just kind of educational. And if you want to incorporate any of these things in your lifestyle, it is important for you to speak to somebody who understands your journey, somebody who understands your story. And so let's go straight into the 10 ways in which you can curb cravings. Of course, when it comes to hunger, it might be difficult for you to be able to say one thing or the other, but you find that if you're able to deal with your cravings, it can also be easy for you to deal with your hunger pangs. Number one, plan ahead of time. Think about those times when you will be difficult for you to be fasting. So, for example, you started fasting in the morning, and then you get to a point around 2 or 3 p.m., you're starting to feel it's much more difficult, and you find your concentration levels are dipping, and you find that your energy levels are dipping, and you want to reach out to the food and things like that. When in actual sense, you haven't gotten to the point where you want to go into refeeding. You might, once you plan ahead of time and you know those difficult times, you might want to do something or some activity that will help you to be able to kind of get your mind off the food. You might want to go for a walk at that time, or you might want to call a friend at that time, so that when you are busy, your mind will not necessarily start to think much about eating, kind of in a way getting yourself off the food or thinking about food, because once you're not thinking about food, it will help you to avoid those cravings. And then number two, you need to start small with a small goal. You know, I've always said, if you've never fasted before, you can't wake up in the morning and then you want to do 24 hours of fasting. That will be basically planning to fail in a way. But if you decide to break it down, if you decide, let's say, for example, you want to kind of have a smaller window of fasting and another window of feeding, that will actually help you to start little by little, and then you grow into your fasting. You become much more aware of what you want and what you don't want, and that continues to become a lifestyle. With time, you become much more better at doing this. I always say, if you are addicted to sugar, you can't start in the morning and say, I'm going to go onto a sugar fast. When I'm fasting, I'll go off sugar completely. I'm not going to have any sugar completely, because that will make you to start to crave for sugar. And so if you are a sugar addict or addicted to sugar, it might be that if you go into fasting, the moment that you're feeding, you might want, instead of taking, let's say, five spoons of sugar, I don't know if anybody does that, you might want to reduce it, maybe gradually start by reducing one spoon, and then you reduce another one. Or you might go for substitution as well. Instead of having sugar, you can have honey, which is natural, has got some antibacterial properties, and that can actually be as well beneficial to your health. So you can actually say, instead of me breaking free completely from everything all of a sudden and deciding I can't be able to do this, do that all of a sudden, in all these long in a short period of time, they can actually result in issues. But if you start to do small adjustments, that can really impact you positively and help you with your weight loss journey or your intermittent fasting journey. Number three, drink more water. We know that water can be hydrating. Water can help you to stay hydrated, but also can help you with regulating of appetite. I've always say, when you're craving for something or you're feeling hungry and things like that, always think, is it hunger that I'm feeling, or is it that I'm just thirsty? So when you drink more water, water can help you with staying hydrated. Water can help you with regulating your appetite, and water can help you to stay fuller, and that can help you avoid those cravings. And then the other thing is that during your feed time, you might want to increase your protein intake, because if you're increasing your protein intake, protein will fill you for a longer time. But also, protein will help you in terms of trying to avoid the loss of mass, the loss of body mass. Of course, you don't want to lose the muscle mass, sorry, during the time of fasting. So protein is a very good way of maintaining your muscle mass, but also it's going to preserve that energy for a longer time throughout the day, and that can help you prevent things like fatigue, and also be able to deal with things like cravings as you go through your day of your fasting. And then the next thing to think about, number five, is during the feeding window, focus mainly on fiber rich food. A diet that is rich in fiber will help you to curb things like sugar cravings. It will help you to regulate your blood glucose, blood sugar levels. They will become stable over the day, and that will help you prevent, again, things like cravings. Also, when you need to think about a fiber rich food is also good for your gut. Your gut needs those that food. The bacteria in the gut needs that food, and that food can help you to kind of, in a way, have very good different impacts on your body, not just necessarily on cravings. Number 6, make sure that you are getting enough sleep. I talked about sleep yesterday. Sleep helps you with maintaining a good circadian rhythms, and this can help you regulate your hormones. That impact on things like appetite and metabolism, and that can help you with your journey of being able to do these long periods of fasting. But if you're not sleeping well, if you're not sleeping enough, your body can actually hold on to more. It might end up kind of in a way also just making you feel exhausted, feeling more stressed out. And once you're stressed out, of course, you want to reach out for those comfort foods, and those foods can actually impact you in a sense in being able to be kind of fasting throughout the day. And then number 7 is slow down and eat mindfully during those times when you are not fasting. Sometimes you can find that because you are not fasting, you might actually tell yourself, I want to eat quickly. Sorry, I want to eat quickly. I want to fill up quickly because I'm really starving. I've not been eating for 12 hours, for 16 hours, for 24 hours. But then that can actually work to your disadvantage because you just end up eating more, and you might end up having all those kind of like your comfort foods. You might end up having those the ultra processed foods, etc. Those cravings can be satisfied. But when you start to become more mindful, when you are slowing down, it helps you to kind of break the food down, just break it into smaller particles so that you are able to absorb those particles. You are able to enjoy the food. You are able to enjoy the flavors, and that can help you to actually be fuller for longer, and also can help you to kind of in a way avoid cravings. Number 8, keep yourself busy and distracted throughout the day so that you don't think about food. I know it makes a bit it might seem a bit funny, but of course cravings are a normal part of life. This is something that will come when you're fasting. But for example, if you decide, if you're fasting, like Ray was saying, she's been busy at work. So if you're busy, you're not going to be thinking about food. If you're busy, you're not going to be thinking about when is my next meal coming. You'll not be sitting and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what time this fasting is gonna finish, because your mind is occupied, your mind is busy. But if you're not busy, you'll find yourself wanting to go back into quickly those cravings and things like that, and that can help you a lot in terms of being able to fast and stay through the long durations of those fasting windows. Then the ninth thing is you need to reduce stress. Of course, when you're feeling stressed, you want to go into comfort eating, you want to go into emotional eating. And if you kind of in a way are able to monitor, are able to regulate, are able to reduce stress levels, that can actually help you to be more healthy, to be more conscious about the food choices that you make. You want to find out, like, I've been fasting the whole day, I don't want to just come from fasting and go straight into my pizzas and chocolates and things like that. But of course, again, if you're eating these things, it might be just nice to remember moderation is key. Don't kind of in a way, as Isabella said to us a couple of weeks back, she was saying like cravings can come sometimes from restrictions, from kind of in a way not being able to eat whenever you want to eat those things. And maybe just you might want to reach out for one chocolate kind of to in a way to satisfy that craving, rather than getting to a point saying like even becoming more stressed out because you're not having the food that you need to eat. And then the last thing, or number 10, is chewing gum, which may be something that will keep your mouth busy. And of course, if your mouth is busy over a long period of time, it can actually reduce both sweet and salty cravings, and that will help you in particular in trying to avoid those cravings. And of course, when it comes to these chewing gum, be careful when you're selecting the version that you're doing. You're selecting, maybe if you're going for those versions that are sugar free, it will help you to avoid in any way damaging your teeth and having dental issues. But those are some of the ways in which you can be able to kind of in a way encourage yourself to go through the fasted window without craving for food. But again, as I say, those are 10 strategies that I kind of can be helpful. But if you get to a point and you're finding it difficult, instead of feeling very frustrated, instead of feeling very anxious, instead of becoming even emotionally unhappy and having a wrong relationship with food, maybe you might just want to get something in moderation, and that will help you to deal with your cravings. But again, it calls for a lot of discipline. It calls for a lot of good relationship, and healthy relationship with food is key, which is is something again that we talked about with Frey, and it might be worthwhile watching that video again where she talks about how she's able to maintain a healthy relationship with food, because at the end of the day, cravings can be as a result of an unhealthy relationship with food, sometimes, not always. But if you are able to maintain that good relationship, it helps you to be able to curb those cravings, to be able to know when you're hungry, when you're not hungry, and of course being disciplined, because fasting is not an easy task. Your body will resist it. Your body will be angry at you. Your body will be upset. Your mother part of your brain will want to protect you. But because you are in that and you know that it's going to be beneficial in one way or the other, you will continue to encourage yourself. You'll continue to tell yourself, I'm not starving. I'm only here for a duration of time. And then once my feeding window comes, I will be able to get myself into eating without any problems whatsoever. And so that was just kind of like a quick run through how you can be able to manage those hunger pangs and cravings. I haven't talked about hunger because if you're hungry and you might be able to do different things, and maybe I might address that at a later time. But Dr. Nyambayo, as I said, and myself will be coming back later on once the challenge is finished, because we've paused a little bit the lunchtime talk so that I can concentrate and focus on this challenge. But once the challenge is finished, we will be able to come back and talk a little bit, have more discussion about our cravings and how you can, on top of all these strategies that I've given today, to be able to deal with that. And of course, so if you are in any way having any medical issues, as I mentioned before, please, before you embark on any fasting, or before you start thinking about anything that we've talked about today, it might be important for you to have a chat with a professional. And so that brings us to the end of our day 17 of our intermittent fasting challenge. I shall be back again tomorrow with another episode, and I'll be talking about something different. Until then, I pray and I hope that you will prosper and be in good health, and that you will have a great evening, and that whatever that you do, you will be able to prioritize your health. And if you find this helpful, as I've always said, it might be worthwhile sharing this information, passing it on to another person, liking this to help us kind of continue with this journey that we are on. And of course, if you can consider subscribing, that will help us quite a lot. But until tomorrow, I shall see you again. I pray that you will continue to prosper and be in good health, even as your souls prosper. I hope you have a good evening, and I shall see you again soon. Goodbye.